Maldives president seeks Chinese tourists. Cancel Maldives alarms President Muizu.
The free trade agreement signed between our countries stands as a symbol of the close commercial ties between China and Maldives.
Muizu urges China to send more tourists to the island nation. No meeting with President Xi Jinping yet. Maldives plays China card against India. India to develop new airfield in Lakshadweep. Battleground Indian Ocean is our top focus on India First. So has Maldives panicked with Indians cancelling holiday bookings to Maldives, or is the president of Maldives, who's seen as someone who's pro-China, actually playing the China card against India? You heard him. He's urging China to send more tourists to Maldives. India is also talking about an additional airfield in Lakshadweep that won't just be for commercial jets and tourists, but also for fighter aircraft to be based there or fly from there. What does this mean for the future of the Indian Ocean region? I'm Gaurav Sawant. We talk about this in greater detail, but as always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Golden doors of the Sri Ram temple at Ayodhya unveiled. Prime Minister Narendra Modi directs his ministers to show astha and not aggression ahead of the Pran Pratishtha. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the President of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, hold a roadshow in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. India-UAE investment MOUs inked. Opposition India Alliance seat-sharing talks continue. Congress claims seat-sharing formula settled in Uttar Pradesh. Uddhav Sena stakes claim to 23 Lok Sabha seats in Maharashtra. Bengaluru CEO arrested for the murder of a 4-year-old son. She carried out the body of a toddler in a bag from Goa to Karnataka. And India Today has just scooped out exclusive details of the Sri Ram Mandir Pran Pratishtha invitation. Sources are telling India Today all political party chiefs to be invited. Sources are also telling India Today this would mean Akhilesh Yadav of the Samajwadi Party, Arvind Kejriwal of the Aam Aadmi Party, M.K. Stalin of the DMK to be invited. Sources are also telling India Today that invitation cards are being sent out both to Sharad Pawar of the NCP and to Uddhav Thackeray. The temple trust, the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth Kshetra, will send out these invitation cards very soon. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Himanshu Mishra, breaking this big story first on India Today. Himanshu, इस निमंत्रण पत्र के पीछे सोच क्या है और रणनीति क्या है? इस समय इस तरह की खबर आना कि सभी विपक्षी दलों के प्रमुख विपक्षी दलों के नेताओं को ये न्योता भेजा जाएगा।
देखिए गौरव, बिल्कुल एक तरीके से ये माना जा रहा था कि कुछ चुनिंदा लोगों को ही जो है निमंत्रण भेजा जाएगा राजनीतिक क्षेत्र में, लेकिन जो हमारे सूत्रों का कहना है कि 45 ऐसे लोग हैं राजनीतिक पार्टियों के जिनको ये इनविटेशन भेजा गया है। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी तो प्राण प्रतिष्ठा का कार्यक्रम करेंगे ही, साथ में जेपी नड्डा को भेजा गया है, तो मल्लिकार्जुन खड़गे को भेजा गया है, लीडर ऑफ अपोजिशन के तौर पर जो है अधीर रंजन चौधरी को भेजा गया है, अखिलेश यादव को भेजा जा रहा है, शरद पवार, एसडी देवगौड़ा, एमके स्टालिन, ममता बनर्जी, नवीन पटनायक से लेके तमाम लोगों को जो है वो इनविटेशन भेजे जा रहे हैं। नीतीश कुमार भी है, लालू प्रसाद यादव है, मायावती, ये तमाम वो लोग हैं जो अपनी अपनी पार्टी के अध्यक्ष हैं और प्रमुख विपक्षी दल हैं। ना सिर्फ प्रमुख विपक्षी दलों को भेजा जा रहा है, बल्कि जो छोटे दल हैं जो सरकार के साथ हैं या ना एनडीए में है ना जो है इंडिया ब्लॉक में है, उनको भी भेजा जाएगा। तो एक तरीके से जगन मोहन रेड्डी भी इसमें आएंगे, केसीआर भी है, तो तमाम राजनीतिक दलों को तो भेजा जा रहा है। साथ में जो है गृह मंत्री अमित शाह को भी निमंत्रण भेजा गया है, रक्षा मंत्री राजनाथ सिंह को भी निमंत्रण भेजा गया है, लाल कृष्ण आडवाणी, मुरली मनोहर जोशी, 45 ऐसी राजनीतिक हस्तियां हैं जिनको ये निमंत्रण पत्र जो है वो पर्सनली यानी व्यक्तिगत तौर पर दिया जाएगा या उनके जहां वो रहते हैं वहां पे भेजा जाएगा। तो एक
ऐसी परिस्थिति में इनमें से कुछ नेता हैं या कुछ दल हैं हिमांशु जो सनातन के विरुद्ध बातें कर चुके हैं, सनातन को डेंगू मलेरिया से तुलना कर चुके हैं। ऐसी परिस्थिति में अगर राजनीति को भी देखा जाए तो किस तरह से आप इसको देखते हैं कि जो विपक्ष है या जो विपक्षी अलायंस है, इंडिया गठबंधन है, वो इसे किस तरह से देखेगा?
देखिए, मुझे लगता है कि अगर पॉलिटिकली रूप से देखा जाए तो बीजेपी ये बिल्कुल नहीं चाहेगी कि इस पर राजनीति हो, और प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी खुद इस बात को लेकर पिछली कैबिनेट की मीटिंग में कह चुके हैं कि बहुत ज्यादा अग्रेशन नहीं होना चाहिए, विवादित बयान नहीं होने चाहिए, आपकी भाषा अगर आप बोले भी तो मर्यादित होनी चाहिए, जिससे सरकार और पार्टी की छवि धूमिल नहीं होनी चाहिए। 22 तारीख का कार्यक्रम बहुत भव्य होने वाला है, दिव्य होने वाला है। अपने अपने लोकसभा क्षेत्रों में आप जाइए, लोगों को ज्यादा से ज्यादा ये कार्यक्रम देख सके, ये सुनिश्चित कीजिए। और 22 तारीख के बाद आपके क्षेत्र से लोग जो है ज्यादा से ज्यादा राम मंदिर के दर्शन करने जाएं, ये सब सुनिश्चित कीजिए। लेकिन एक चीज आपको समझनी होगी, अगर ये निमंत्रण पत्र दिए जा रहे हैं और अपोजिशन इसका विरोध कर रहा है, डेंगू से, मलेरिया से इसकी तुलना कर देते हैं, डीएमके के सांसद हैं या स्टालिन के जो बेटे हैं उदयनिधि, वो इस तरीके के बयान विपक्षी दलों की तरफ से आते हैं, आरजेडी की तरफ से आए, तेजस्वी यादव ने दिए या बिहार के जो शिक्षा मंत्री हैं उन्होंने दिए। तो ये इस तरीके से बीजेपी को लगता है कि अगर निमंत्रण पत्र दिया जाए और ना आए तो इससे और स्टैब्लिश हो जाएगा कि ये जो लोग हैं ये जो है राम मंदिर के विरोध में हैं। और इस चुनाव के अंदर भारतीय जनता पार्टी को लगता है कि सबसे बड़ा अगर कोई मुद्दा बनेगा तो वो है राम जन्मभूमि का मुद्दा है, राम मंदिर का मुद्दा है, जो 500 साल बाद जो है राम मंदिर बनने जा रहा है। और उस कार्यक्रम में अगर सबको इनवाइट किया जा रहा है और जो नहीं आ रहे हैं तो जनता के बीच संदेश चला जाएगा कौन किस तरफ है और कौन किसके खिलाफ है।
इस बड़ी खबर पर आप नजर बनाए रखिए। ताजा जानकारी के लिए फिर मैं आपके पास लौटूंगा। हिमांशु मिश्रा दे getting us these exclusive details. Invitation cards are being sent out to top leaders of opposition parties. In fact, not just top leaders but also party heads are being invited. 45 such invitation cards are being sent out by the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth Kshetra, and we'll be tracking that story very closely. But now I want to move on to our top story on India first. The president of Maldives, Mohammad Muizzu, is in China. He's on a 5-day-long state visit. On day 2 of his 5-day-long visit, he urged China to send more tourists to Maldives. This after calls for mass cancellation by Indians, angered by not just the Maldives president having run an India out campaign to be elected as president, but his government ministers calling Prime Minister Narendra Modi names. Maldives president appears to be playing the China card against India. But there is another issue here. Rising radicalization in Maldives, that remains a major cause for concern. After a spate of cancellations by Indian tourists in Maldives, the rattled president of Maldives has urged China to send more tourists to his island nation to prevent what many islanders there see as a disastrous outcome of his anti-India policies. Maldives President Mohammad Muizzu is in China on a 5-day state visit. He's accompanied by his wife Sajida Mohammad and a number of top Maldivian officials. China and Maldives are expected to ink a number of agreements on economic cooperation and trade.
The fact that I'm here in China on my first state visit is testament to the commitment of His Excellency President Xi Jinping and the people of China to the Maldives. We have no doubt that China will be our closest partner in development. The free trade agreement signed between our countries stands as a symbol of the close commercial ties between China and Maldives. I'm told that it is the first comprehensive FTA between China and a South Asian country.
Muizu was elected to office on an anti-India plank. After being sworn in as president, he first visited Turkey and then the UAE for the COP28 Environment Summit, where he had an interaction with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But in a major departure from the past, Muizu chose not to visit India as his first port of call after being elected president. His 5-day state visit to China is being seen as an attempt to play China against India. New Delhi chose not to react to Muizu choosing to visit China first.
It's a very short-sightedness on the part of the present government to really think, that we can really try to not keep the age-old relationship that we have always had with India.
Muizu is still in China's Fujian province, meeting provincial leaders on day 2 of his 5-day visit. He's scheduled to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping, who's hosting a banquet in his honor, and will also meet the Chinese Premier.
So yes, the trips obviously show that we have many friends across the world and that we wish to strengthen those bonds as well. It does not undermine in any way our relationship to India.
In Fujian, President Muizu addressed the Invest Maldives Forum. He described China as Maldives' valued ally and integral collaborator. But there are apprehensions that Maldives could be the next victim of China's Belt and Road Initiative after Sri Lanka and Pakistan. But a bigger cause for concern for Beijing could well be rising Islamist radicalization in Maldives. According to the US, 250 people from Maldives joined the Islamic State between 2014 and 18. Maldives is seen as the largest contributor to Islamic State terror. In 2023, US sanctioned 20 individuals in Maldives. In the same year, the US also sanctioned 29 companies for aiding Islamic State terror. Fugitive from law in India, Zakir Naik's speeches are viral in Maldives. The China-Pakistan-Maldives nexus could create additional challenges for India in the Indian Ocean region. Bureau Report, India Today. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently visited Lakshadweep, and that triggered an overwhelming interest in the Union territory. India is now moving ahead with plans to develop a new airport at the Minicoy Islands. Now, why this is crucial? Government sources are telling India Today that this won't just be an airfield for commercial aircraft. This would be a dual-purpose airfield and will operate even fighter jets, and that has a very major strategic importance in the Indian Ocean region. Manjeet Negi brings you this report.
Off the southwest coast of the Indian mainland, a cluster of 36 islands, bathed in sunlight on its sandy shores and adorned with lush, verdant scenery. The exclusive airstrip of Lakshadweep is nestled on Agatti Island. This picturesque Union territory is accessible by both sea and air, with flights operating from Kochi in Kerala. Prime Minister Narendra Modi endorsed Lakshadweep as the ultimate tourist destination. Plans now afoot to construct a brand new airport on one of its islands. At the southernmost tip lies Minicoy, approximately 400 kilometers southwest of Kochi, spanning across roughly 5 square kilometers. Strategically positioned near one of the most bustling shipping routes. Merely 130 kilometers from the northernmost island of the Maldives. An earlier proposal to construct an airfield on Minicoy has been revived. Elevated to a dual-purpose facility capable of accommodating fighter jets, military planes and commercial aircraft. Originally proposed by the Indian Coast Guard, as per the revised plan, the Indian Air Force would manage operations from Minicoy, according to government sources. A jointly purposed airfield on Minicoy can serve as a strategic vantage point, overseeing the Arabian Sea and the broader Indian Ocean region. With Manjeet Negi, Bureau Report, India Today.
And before I bring in our guests on the broadcast, I quickly want to cut across to our reporters on ground zero. We have Geeta Mohan, our foreign affairs editor in Malé, in Maldives, and Shivimol KG joins us from the Kavarati island in Lakshadweep. Geeta, to you first. The president of Maldives is in China and he's asking China to send more tourists, to become the largest country sending tourists as it was in pre-COVID days. What's the buzz on ground with Indians deciding if there's an India Out campaign that the president ran before his elections, Indians will not go to Maldives? What's the buzz on ground?
Well, Gaurav, the tourism industry is a little jittery when it comes to these cancellations or news of India not looking at or looking to Maldives as a holiday destination, that Bollywood will not be looking at the Maldives as a shoot destination. And so they are worried. But again, replacing India over here in the Maldives by China is rather impossible. If you come over here, you know how deeply entrenched India is in the entire way of life here in the Maldives. It's not just the tourism sector where tourists come in, the hospitality sector, the hospitals, medicine, the medical facilities over here, doctors, nurses, they're from India. And if you look at the basic necessities that the Maldives has and is fulfilled by India, food products. So in a lot of ways, when I spoke with Maldivians over here and the tourism industry, they do say that India is irreplaceable. There can be addition, but there cannot be replacement of India. We know that the current dispensation is playing the China card, and President Muizu is in China with almost his entire cabinet, which includes the tourism minister. So these are statements coming in from the current dispensation, which is only 2 months old here in the Maldives. One will have to wait and see how this entire controversy really pans out. They were quite careful. The suspensions happened, but over here, a common Maldivian, as also the opposition leaders are not seeking two things over here, Gaurav. One is suspension is not enough, that they should be terminated. And secondly, that there has to be condemnation and apology, if not an apology, at least a condemnation at the highest level, which is yet to come.
You know, and it's very disappointing that if Maldivians depend so much on India, and if India has gone out of its way to help Maldives each time, whether it's COVID or when Maldives ran out of water or the security, an India Out campaign should make a man president. 54% votes he gets and becomes president of a country with an India Out campaign. Rising radicalization in Maldives is another cause for concern. But Geeta, stay on. We'll talk about that in greater detail during the course of this broadcast. Shivimol, as far as Lakshadweep is concerned, indeed very beautiful. But you've been on ground. What all needs to be done? What are people in Lakshadweep talking about? How do more Indian tourists get to Lakshadweep with that quality tourism that people say they're looking at?
Well, Gaurav, as far as the residents and also the tourists are concerned, Lakshadweep needs a lot of development in terms of infrastructure because, firstly, with the commutation facilities, there is you can either take a flight from Kochi or you can take the sea route from Kochi. So, but the flights are very limited. There's just one flight that's operating 6 days a week, and that's a 72-seater flight. So there's a very limited number of seats available in the flight. So it's not very easy, and it gets pre-booked much earlier. So a quick getaway is not really possible. And when it comes to the sea route, there are 7 cruises traveling from, starting from Kochi to Lakshadweep. But in reality, it's only 3 cruises that's actually operating on ground. So that's a difficulty that's been raised by people. And also, there's a lot of formalities. You have to get an entry permit. You have to get a clearance certificate by the local police in Kerala, in Kochi. And after that, once you reach Lakshadweep, also from you to move from one island to the other, also you need this entry permit with you all the time. So there's a lot of formalities involved for you to plan a trip to Lakshadweep. That's one concern. And also in terms of travel, like this, the news that the Minicoy Island will be getting a new airport is a big boost for the for Lakshadweep if Lakshadweep is concerned, because whoever I spoke to were telling about the same, because islands like Minicoy and Bangaram are purely for tourism purpose.
Yes.
There are 36 islands in Lakshadweep, out of which only 10 are inhabited, and among that also Minicoy and Bangaram are purely for tourism purpose because residents of natives of Lakshadweep are not residing there. It's completely free. It's beautiful. Bangaram Islands is where we saw those viral images of Prime Minister Modi. It's from Bangaram Island. So it's beautiful. It just needs a big boost. And if an airport is coming in Minicoy Island, it will be a major boost, considering that island is particularly for tourist purposes.
Oh, absolutely. And let's hope that action is taken, not just words, to develop not just Lakshadweep, but also Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And it's huge and it's very, very beautiful. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands along with Lakshadweep on the other side. Shiv Mol for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. But this is battleground Indian Ocean. The question is Maldives a pawn in China's hands? Also, rising radicalization in Maldives, with the country sending the largest number of terrorists to Islamic State between 2014, individuals and entities being declared terrorists and terror supporters in 2023 seems to be an added problem for India. What should one make of this latest situation? Joining me on this India Today special broadcast, Ambassador Veena Sikri keeps a close watch on developments in the region. Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma is a distinguished fellow at the Center for Land Warfare Studies, has extensively worked in eastern Ladakh and in Arunachal Pradesh. Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, former flag officer commanding in chief Western Naval Command, a naval aviator, knows the lay of this land very closely. But Ambassador Sikri, what do you make of the president of Maldives asking China to send more tourists to Maldives? Is this panic or is he cocking a snook at India?
No, I think the president of Maldives has been clearly rattled by the response to what his own minister, the deputy ministers in his government, the completely uncalled for, insulting and derogatory remarks made by these 3 deputy ministers has evinced a reaction, a spontaneous reaction across India and in Maldives. I think this has completely rattled the president of Maldives. I think, first of all, these remarks were completely uncalled for. Our prime minister was in Lakshadweep. He is developing the islands of Lakshadweep, building an airport there. This is perfectly within our territory and will be a great boost to tourism for India and for this region. But from there, for these deputy ministers to make these uncalled for remarks has evinced a reaction across India. Ordinary people have cancelled their visits. Ease my trip, make my trip, saying they were not taking bookings. Chambers of commerce are calling for a drop in promotion on Maldives. And I must tell you that within Maldives, the reaction has been equally strong. Former Vice President of Maldives, former Defense Minister, Foreign Minister of Maldives, they are calling out the president and they're saying, what are you doing? Suspension is not enough. You must dismiss these ministers. And ordinary people, I know even, the ministers, there's some people in my group, South Asia Women's Network, they're sending out messages. They're really embarrassed and sorry for these kind of remarks having been made by our ministers.
And yet he continues to do so, ma'am. Is he very clearly playing the China card to the hilt? Admiral Sinha President Muizu fought and won elections on an India out plank. Does India out translate into China in? Commercial projects initially, that hydrography joint operations, the ones with India have already been cancelled. Does China move in this territory then, sir?
Well, thank you, Gaurav, for getting me on your program. Let me address the first question first. This India out, the background is like this, that Mr. Yamin, who was supposed to have fought the election, but he was jailed and therefore he disqualified and he could not stand for election. Thereafter, his coalition partner, which is the party of Moizu, he doesn't belong to his party, he's a coalition partner, they chose him. And then he realized that on his own, he is not going to win an election. And therefore, very in the last minute, only in last about 20-25 days, that, this India out has been, he knew that India out will actually gel well with large section of people. Because it's very natural. Any small country in the vicinity of big country, anybody who's anti-India, he, draws more attention, he gets more support.
Well,
That's
they
true.
get our vaccines from us, they get their water from us, Indian Navy ships provide in the water, and now when they're, yet they want India out. I mean, someone needs to read out the right act to such elements.
See,
It's
not
disappointing
possible.
that such elements are chosen or elected as presidents.
Gaurav, he does not have his own political base. He is just fought on this election campaign. Basically, Yamin's vote has gone to him. A time will come when, if he does not comply with everything that Yamin says, which the time will come, then you will find the friction between two parties actually, coming to surface. But having said that, there is no doubt that there is a sentiment among some sections of society where India, having, sent the helicopters, some of our troops were maintaining the helicopters and the Dornier aircraft. They think that, they are the troops. They're not fighting troops. They're all maintainers of these aircraft. And if it comes, they have, evacuated 500 people in last 5 years.
Exactly.
Saved their lives. So they will get to know, they will realize this only when the Indians are not there. And very unlikely that from that distance, China will come and start doing all this.
No, we've seen when Maldives ran out of water, China did not come and give them water. Indian Navy ships did. When they needed vaccines, China did not give them vaccines. India did. But General Sharma, do you see this China problem expanding from Himalayas now along Indian Ocean region, not just Sri Lanka in the Bay of Bengal, now all along the Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea? China is expanding its navy at a very fast pace, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav, for inviting me. At the outset, I must say that the remarks of the deputy ministers were in bad taste, very bad taste, and I think the reaction that outflowed from India is absolutely normal. Having said that, isn't all the neighbors that we have in India playing the China card? When we are, talking about Maldives, there is every weapon system that Bangladesh is now using, from tanks to aircraft, belong to China. The BNS Sheikh Hasina, the newest of the submarine bases has been made by the Chinese. The Nepalese have got roads and tunnels being made through Himalayas, coming from Sri Gadse down to Kathmandu, being made by the Chinese. In Malé itself, the airport onto Malé, the bridge, the first bridge which was connecting between the airport and Malé, was made by the Chinese. Right. It's called Sina Malé. And the amount of Chinese investment in Maldives and the BRI in the course of last 5 to 6 years is tremendous. So it's not one day's work here. It's the work being done, desalination plants, the link being established to other things, other places there, the agriculture being done in Maldives. So the work being done by the Chinese in each one of our neighboring countries is so tremendous that, now you can't say they're playing Chinese card. It's the way Chinese are getting it. Our reaction, I think, initial reaction, the anger, the anguish is absolutely normal. But the strength of the diplomacy is to work with inimical governments and find measures to it. Maldives is our neighbor. We can't lose the neighbor. We can't have anger between all our neighbors and say we want to rise up to become a power in the global south. We have to take our neighbors with us. So the initial anguish apart, and we must state a point firmly and strongly, but we also must move forward to make sure that the goodwill that exists in Maldives, that we are able to take advantage of that goodwill.
Okay, that goodwill seems to be dwindling when a hostile government is elected. Ambassador Sikri, President Muizu will remain hostile to India and is openly subservient to China. Is he walking into a trap eyes wide shut like Sri Lanka and other countries? Or, as General Sharma points out, somewhere the Chinese are making deeper inroads and replacing us in development projects all across?
Look, I am very much in favor of, good relations with neighbors. And certainly as part of India's neighborhood first policy, Maldives is very important. But there are red lines. And we cannot forget those red lines. Those statements by those ministers were red lines. The situation in Maldives today is turbulent. People today sent messages that there may be some demonstrations in Maldives against their own president. So I think that it is not that we are being inimical to them. I think the situation in Maldives is in churn. There is radicalization that you mentioned. There is a lot of drugs that is spread across the island, which is a difficult problem. They have huge internal issues, but India is willing to help them. They realize that the help for India, there are so many people from Maldives living in Kochi and Bengaluru and other in these two states, and they are living happily. But if the situation continues with the anti-Indianism, then India has to consider what action to take. Despite the fact that we are willing to help the people of Maldives in anything, any way they want, provided you yourself, are willing to respond in equal kind.
Is this a setback for Indian diplomacy that all across our neighborhood there are major setbacks, and are our neighbors cutting their nose to spite their face? Pakistan may do that, and we can understand that. Pakistan is a nutcase, but what about countries which are very friendly like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka falling into that debt trap with China?
Now, let me tell you very clearly that China is overactive in South Asia. They should remember that they are not a South Asian country. They are north of the Himalayas, and they should, not try and interfere in South Asian countries. But they're doing that, whether it is China, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and now, of course, Maldives, and we saw earlier in Nepal as well. They tried. But I must say that it is India's own very successful neighborhood first policy that brings it all back on track. Look at Nepal today. Our external affairs minister was there very recently. We saw that they have realized that when they are friendly with China, all that China was doing with them was salami slicing at their border in the north, the China-Nepal border in the north, and putting their own border posts and so on. So every country has realized that if you try and be friendly with China at the expense of India, it's not going to serve your interests. That is what Indian diplomacy is all about.
Yet, Admiral Sinha, Maldives continues to do that under Muizu. It's almost like cutting your nose to spite your face. But what do you make of this new airfield that's coming up, or that's being talked about in the Minicoy Island in Lakshadweep? Tourism plus strategic importance, fighters in Lakshadweep along with Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Is that a signal being sent out to China? Because that's very clearly unlikely to deter China from undertaking all its operations, whether in Bangladesh or Myanmar or Sri Lanka or now Maldives.
Gaurav, it is only 130 kilometers from the northernmost island called Hanimadu. Hanimadu has got an airfield which the Chinese wanted to increase the length to make it an international airfield. It nearly got given to the Chinese till President Soli came into power. And I think that job is being done by the Indian company. That is number one. Within 130 kilometers, every runway is a dual use, Gaurav. Nothing stops, runways being used by fighters or transport aircraft. So every runway is a dual use. But the point is that it is very close. That island is more than 5.5 square kilometers, which is bigger than many of the islands. And we already have a presence there of some of our Navy for quite some time. And this island, if the Air Force is going to manage, I am sure the fighter aircraft will operate. It will cover the entire archipelago of Maldives. Entire archipelago will get covered. And therefore, for any other country, especially China, they better be warned that any mischief in this area, making it militarized, can harm them. In fact, there were a lot of talks at one time which was sort of put behind the burners now, that, they wanted to put a radar in Hanimadu.
Yes.
And that radar had a reversed engineer green pine radar with a range of 600 kilometers. It would have put all your entire southern peninsula of India under surveillance, which is not a very good news. And therefore, I am sure that our, diplomacy prevailed at that time. They will prevail again, and they will read the right act to Maldives to not to do anything which is a security concern to India.
In fact, that's the point I was coming to, General Sharma. If China were to set up a listening post or a radar station or start docking their ships the way they're trying to do, and in some instances successfully doing in Sri Lanka, that would adversely impact India's strategic security. Is President Moizu, as head of Maldives, as president of Maldives, adversely impacting India's security in more ways than one, actually?
So, Gaurav, it's a question of democratic dispensation. The people of Maldives elected him as their president, and we have to work with him. We worked with President Musharraf. Didn't we work with Prime Minister Khalida Zia? We worked with Prime Minister Oli. We have worked and we have done extensive amount of work of relationship with any one of our neighbors which were not really fond of us. So what? We understand that he's come on a plank which is anti-India, but finally he'll come around to accept it that we are the closest neighbor. And a country like Maldives, the relationship is well understandable. There have been times we have tough times with Sri Lanka, but we have good relations. Finally, last 2-3 years, we have worked extensively to improve relations with Sri Lanka. We had troubled times earlier. So it's just a way of it. And I don't think we should get overexcited. We are hurt by what the minister said. We must develop Lakshadweep as a place. You can't have within your own country having internal permits to go across to their country. Even Ladakh has opened up. Even Ladakh people can go without permits, and you require a permit to go to your own territory, Lakshadweep, when we can go to Turtuk Tyakshi, which is a 0 point facing Pakistan in Ladakh. We can go there. The civilians can go there. But to go to Lakshadweep, you require a permit. I think we need to have a change of broad policies across here to say that it is open. And of course, we require infrastructure in Lakshadweep. But that does not mean that we should say just because he made a noise and visited China for the first time that we jettison Maldives from our radar. No, that will be incorrect. Our relationship goes through centuries altogether.
Yes.
And also, let me add, I agree with the issue of radicalization. And Zakir Naik's videos are in India also. In all of our neighbors, Zakir Naik's videos are there. So what? Doesn't matter. We need to say that we have to work through this difficult times now and get around to get the ministers to be dismissed or removed from the cabinet or whatever it is, to take some stronger action, and he should visit us. I think the statement
since you mentioned radicalization, I want to bring Ambassador Sikri into this conversation on the issue of radicalization. And ma'am, we have those statistics that we are playing out on India Today in the form of graphics. 250 persons from Maldives traveled to Syria to join the Islamic State between 2014 and 18. Majority, so this is data of the US Treasury Department. US in 2023 imposed sanctions on 20 individuals and 29 companies that were providing financial support not just to Islamic State but also to Al-Qaeda groups in Maldives. This radicalization, is this Maldives' worst kept secret and not highlighted enough? Everyone looks at tourism. No one looks at the terrorism.
No, absolutely. Radicalization is a reality. And within Maldives, it is well hidden, because when a tourist goes to Maldives, you only go to a island and you stay there. You don't really move around at all. It's one resort, one island, and you don't have the chance to move around or to meet the people of Maldives at all. So in that sense, tourists are not aware of this, but radicalization is very real, and it has been because of Pakistan, and to some extent, Pakistan acting on behalf of Saudi Arabia over the years, decades. It's not happened overnight. And it's something that we have to realize. But I have always seen that interaction, it doesn't mean that if they're radicalized, you don't interact with them. There is growing radicalization even in Bangladesh. But the answer is to interact more and to bring the people over for studying in your universities. Let them see, because many of these people are not aware of what it is like to live in a pluralistic society, in a society with many religions. So they are cut off in that sense. But I must tell you that the women of Maldives are not so affected by radicalization. They are the ones who are the hard workers. They are the ones who are very open-minded, and they're the ones who are determined to take Maldives forward and to overcome this issue of radicalization. But the combination of radicalization and drugs, this is a very dangerous combination, because the same Pakistan is also bringing in drugs, and it's the same terrible impact of this that is destroying society in Maldives.
And yet radicalization seems to be increasing in Maldives. Admiral Sinha, there was an apprehension that Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed were using some of those uninhabited islands to train people in Maldives and then use them for attacks in southern India. That would be a cause for grave concern for us.
I'm glad you brought me in on this discussion. The Salafi movement in Maldives is very strong and increasing by the day. And this is, even the educated Maldivians are very concerned about this, that it is on the increase. The second thing is, the present president, he is quite, shall I say, forgiving to these elements.
Yes.
Thirdly, his own father, many years ago, he was the first one to get the Salafi preachers from other countries into Maldives. And he was also sort of arrested for doing that. But that has not stopped. It is still on. So that is not a small movement. It's a fairly big movement, and Maldivian people are also extremely worried. So I think that this is one point that you have been making. More than Al-Qaeda, they're all the ideology, the Salafism ideology is increasing, and it's a matter of great concern.
Because General Sharma, in a situation like this, where you have Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror on one of our borders, you have a hostile China on another border, you have this Islamic State ideology in Bangladesh. We've seen a massive terror attack, and fortunately there was a crackdown by the Sheikh Hasina government, and Zakir Naik fled after that. But Zakir Naik, his influence seems to be increasing tremendously in Maldives, and that's a cause for great concern, especially with them studying in India, living in India, coming to India so frequently for medical attention, and those borders or those states are not as well genned up when it comes to this radical Islamist terror, sir.
So that's true. The radical Islam or radicalization of the peoples of Maldives, like many other countries, are a cause of concern to us. We ourselves have some problems of this sort within our country. So naturally, radicalization is we need to address it. And I think one of these good suggestions made by by Mr. Sikri is that we should open up educational institutions in India for children to study in India because of their lack of educational institutions in Maldives, as also give medical facilities and things like that. We have to open up with these people, to some people should visit us in our country, and that relationship will develop in times to come. So we have to work at it. This is a cause of anxiety, but that cause of anxiety doesn't mean that we do not work to that end here.
Oh, absolutely. Ambassador Sikri, just closing comments. The US has a base in Diego Garcia, and we've talked about it very extensively. There are reports that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was also concerned about these latest developments in Maldives and the China visit of the Maldivian president. How do you look at this, and how do you look at the American role, if any, or this is a region that India needs to address effectively?
No, America is concerned about the Maldives, but America has also decided to increase its interaction with the Maldivian government in recent years. Earlier on, they had very little, and as you said, they had sanctioned so many people. But they have now decided that more interaction is a better option, and they are doing that. They are extremely concerned about the radicalization all around, the Indian Ocean and all in South Asia as well. So this is a matter on which we do talk very much. Counterterrorism talks between India and the US are a very important part of our interaction. So we we both share, all these inputs of what is happening in the countries around India. And this is the only way to do it, that we should be aware of it, we should interact with each other, and we should interact with the people as well.
Oh, absolutely. And high time we call a spade a spade. Put facts first, so that then the world realizes what are we dealing with. If we are dealing with somebody who's being subservient to China and anti-Indian interests, then that person needs to be dealt with accordingly. Sir, go on, Admiral Sinha, closing comments, sir.
You know what we need to be very concerned, Gaurav, that you will soon find the Pakistan Navy becoming very active in this part of the world.
Yes.
They have already started exercising last 3-4 days back in the southern Indian Ocean, in the southern Arabian Sea. And China will use Pakistan as a proxy to replace the Indian Navy's jobs which they were doing in Maldives. And this is what should concern us. We will have to keep an eye. The Navy will have to be, very much, they are active. Probably they will have to be concerned, and they will have to keep a very serious eye as to what they're doing. It does reduce our freedom of maneuvering space in that part of the world if you don't have a friendly government, because all kinds of restriction can be put. You don't come into my EZ, you don't come into my so-and-so, whereas we have been doing that freely all this while.
Yes.
And it's a matter of time that the Pakistan Navy will be used as a proxy by the Chinese, and they will be in and around Maldives not very far from now. Just watch it.
No, we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. Thanks for that word of caution. But for joining me here on this India Today special, General Sharma, Ambassador Sikri, and Admiral Sinha, many thanks. A quick break, but don't go anywhere. Up next, we get you the inside details, the explosive truth of that Qatl ki Raat, the night Wing Commander Abhinandan Vardhaman was in Pakistan. And it wasn't out of the goodness of Imran Khan's heart that he was released. It was Prime Minister Narendra Modi's chilling warning. Aaj ki raat hogi Qatl ki raat. Details coming up.
India, as you know, is a land of diversity, where countless stories